You know, there's a moment that comes for all of us. Maybe it's a quiet morning with your coffee, or maybe it's when you're flipping through old photo albums, when you stop and think, what's next for me? Retirement is a huge milestone, a time to celebrate all you've accomplished. But let's be honest, it can also feel a little unsettling. After decades of routines, responsibilities, and knowing exactly who you are in the world, suddenly the calendar is wide open. And that freedom? It's exciting, but it can also be overwhelming. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. So many people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond find themselves asking, how do I fill my days now? Who am I without my job title? How do I make this next chapter meaningful? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How to reinvent yourself after retirement, not just to pass the time, but to thrive, to discover new passions, and to create a life that feels as fulfilling as ever. Now, reinvention doesn't mean you have to completely change who you are. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering parts of yourself that maybe got set aside while you were busy raising a family, building a career, or taking care of others. It's about asking yourself, what brings me joy now? What do I want my days to look like? And most importantly, it's about giving yourself permission to explore, to try new things, and even to stumble a little along the way. So let's start with the first step, redefining your purpose. For so long, your purpose might have been tied to your job, teacher, nurse, engineer, manager. You were needed, and that gave you a sense of direction. But now, your purpose can be anything you want it to be. Maybe it's mentoring younger people in your field, volunteering at an animal shelter, or finally writing that memoir you've been thinking about for years. The key is to ask yourself, what makes me feel useful? What gives me a sense of accomplishment? It doesn't have to be grand. Maybe it's as simple as being the person who always has time to listen to a friend in need. And here's something important. Your purpose can evolve. Maybe right now you want to focus on travel, but in a few years, you'll feel drawn to something else. And that's okay. This is your time. Now let's talk about the second step, rediscovering curiosity. Remember when you were a kid and everything was fascinating? The way clouds moved, the way a flower bloomed, the way a radio worked. Somewhere along the way, life got busy, and that sense of wonder got tucked away. But here's the beautiful thing, it's still there. Retirement is the perfect time to let it out again. Maybe you've always wanted to learn how to paint, or play the guitar, or grow a garden. Maybe you're curious about technology and want to finally master your smartphone or try video calls with your grandkids. Or maybe you'd love to dive into history, astronomy, or cooking. Whatever sparks that "I wonder how this works" feeling. The best part? You don't have to be good at it. This isn't about impressing anyone. It's about enjoying the process. And if you're thinking, but where do I even start? Well, that brings us to our next step, which we'll explore in just a moment. You might be thinking, okay, I like the idea of trying something new, but how do I actually take that first step? It's a great question because sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing what to do, but how to begin. And that's where the third step comes in, starting small. Think about it. When you were working, you didn't become an expert overnight. You learned, you practiced, you built confidence over time. The same goes for this next chapter. If you've always wanted to paint, you don't need to set up a full studio right away. Start with a simple sketch pad and some pencils. If gardening calls to you, begin with a single potted plant instead of digging up the whole backyard. Small steps keep things fun, not overwhelming. And if something doesn't click, that's fine. This isn't about checking boxes, it's about exploring, experimenting, and finding what truly lights you up. Now let's talk about something just as important, connection. One of the biggest shifts after retirement is the change in your social world. No more water cooler chats, no more meetings where you catch up with colleagues. And while that can feel freeing at first, over time, it's easy to miss the sense of belonging that came with those everyday interactions. That's why Step 4 is all about building new communities. This could mean joining a local club, book clubs, walking groups, or even a class at the community center. Or maybe it's reconnecting with old friends who are also navigating retirement. And if getting out feels tricky, the online world is full of possibilities. There are forums, virtual hobby groups, and even Facebook pages where people your age share tips, stories, and encouragement. The key is to find people who share your interests, because nothing fuels reinvention like sharing the journey with others. And here's a little secret. Sometimes the best way to reinvent yourself is to help someone else. Volunteering, whether it's reading to kids at the library, helping out at a food bank, or sharing your professional skills with a nonprofit, does something powerful. It reminds you that your experience matters, that you still have so much to give. And often, in those moments of helping, you'll discover strengths you didn't even realize you had. Now, all of this might sound exciting, but I know some of you are thinking, what if I'm not ready for big changes? What if I just want to enjoy my peace? And that's completely valid. Reinvention doesn't have to mean a complete overhaul. It can also mean redefining what enough looks like for you. Maybe your ideal retirement is slow mornings, long walks, and finally reading all those books piled on your nightstand. That's just as meaningful as someone else's around-the-world trip or new business venture. This is your story. You get to write it exactly how you want. And speaking of stories, there's one more step we need to talk about, one that ties everything together. But before we get there, let's take a quick pause and reflect, because the next part might just change how you see this whole chapter of your life. You know, there's a word we don't use enough when talking about retirement: permission. Permission to slow down if you need to, permission to change your mind, permission to try something and realize it's not for you, and most importantly, permission to dream again. That's what this final step is all about, giving yourself space to imagine. For years, your life may have been shaped by deadlines, responsibilities, and other people's expectations. Now, you get to ask, what would feel truly fulfilling to me? Not what looks good on social media, not what your neighbors are doing, but what makes you excited to get out of bed in the morning. Maybe it's turning a hobby into a small side business, not because you need the money, but because sharing your craft brings you joy. Maybe it's finally taking that cross-country road trip you've talked about for decades. Or maybe it's simply creating a daily rhythm that leaves room for spontaneity, sleeping in when you want, saying yes to last-minute lunches with friends, or spending hours in your workshop just tinkering. Here's the thing. Reinvention isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. Some days you'll feel energized and full of ideas. Other days you might miss the structure of your old routine, and that's okay. This isn't about getting it right. It's about staying curious, staying open, and remembering that every small step counts. So let's wrap this up with 3 gentle reminders. First, be patient with yourself. Just like a garden, growth takes time. Second, celebrate the tiny victories, whether it's finally figuring out how to use video chat, planting your first tomato seedling, or just mustering the courage to walk into that community class. And third, remember that you're not alone. So many people are navigating this same chapter, figuring it out as they go. Before we go, I'd love to hear from you. What's one small thing you're excited to try or have already discovered in this next chapter of your life? Share it in the comments below. Let's inspire each other. And if this video resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more conversations like this. Because here's the truth. Retirement isn't an ending. It's a beginning. A chance to write a story that's entirely yours. And no matter how you choose to fill these pages, the most important part is that it brings you happiness. So go ahead, dream, explore, and enjoy every step of the way. After all, you've earned it. Here's to your next great adventure. See you in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to keep the circle growing.